Pokemon trainers and get into round 3 here at the Utrecht special event. It's going to be the Fluttermane and Incineroar, two dynamic duos in action, facing down against the Urshifu and the Incineroar on Francesco's side.
Turn 1, double Incineroar. We start how we mean to go on here in Utrecht, Lou, and the Intimidate's coming down, but not really going to make too much of an impact to this Urshifu. Still going to be able to launch big surging strikes, but it really does have to be worried about that Fluttermane, especially if it was the speed booster that went off on that turn. It's going to be able to launch a Moonblast into Shifu without fear of being stopped by Fake Out. So the Urshifu in this situation could go for the Terra, but it's unlikely that Francesco wants to commit that to at this early stage in the match. Instead, probably wants to get on out of there and maybe change up the board state.
Well, those sparkles got to shine. It is going to be the terrestrialization on the Urshifu straight out of the blocks, dropping its fighting type weakness to those fairy type attacks, and instead going all out water mode.
Water mode indeed. This Urshifu boosting up the power of its surging strikes as well. The Incineroar is going to be going for the Terra on Boris's side, making sure that it's not going to be falling foul of a Fake Out, maybe trying to get a Fake Out guaranteed into the Urshifu. That's exactly what happens. Fake Out from the Urshifu on Francesco's side, failing on that now Ghost-type Incineroar. It's the follow-up of Moonblast and Fake Out. Urshifu with that Water Terror does survive the turn, but wow, what a great start.
I was going to say as well, going for that Ghost Terror means that you're not going to take any damage from a close combat on the Urshifu, but considering you were going for Fake Out on that turn anyway, it wasn't going to matter anyway. You stopped the Urshifu from going for any damage. Of course, some damage out on the board here, weakening the Urshifu, but a fantastic terrestrialization for Francesco.
And the Incineroar here coming out for Francesco, making sure that it can reset that Intimidate for later down the line. Rillaboom coming in. Now that Incineroar isn't a Fire-type Pokemon. A Woodhammer looks particularly threatening now. And the grassy terrain, of course, getting on the field. Moonblast, the follow-up to Urshifu, is enough for the knockout.
Yeah, Urshifu really does nothing in this game. It is down and out, and the terrestrialization is gone for Francesco. Yes, you get the Rillaboom on the field. You can apply some grassy glide pressure in this next turn, or a Woodhammer damage, but that is going to be severely weakened by the parting shot that Incineroar is able to land on it, while also enabling Boris to switch up his board position, considering what has happened here. Francesco is going to be able to bring a Pokemon in from the back, but Boris can call the shot straight away here by bringing in his second Pokemon.
A bit of a read here from Francesco, wanting to maybe try to capitalize on the Fluttermane, going for an Icy Wind on the switch in, perhaps trying to put on some pressure onto the Incineroar, trying to do a little bit of damage so that later on it's a little bit easier to deal with. But actually Francesco getting the worst end of that particular trade, and just having the Urshifu go for its Terra option, not get any value out of it, and then get it knocked out as well.
Exactly, and now we have a Landorus and a Landorus here on the field. Of course, the Fluttermane on Boris' side isn't going to appreciate a Sludge Bomb coming its way, and it looks like Francesco is considering that choice. Definitely would be an offensive move to play. Fluttermane, however, gets that first advantage, goes for the Icy Wind, does over 50% to the opposing Landorus. Now the Landorus on Boris' side, will it be able to outspeed?
No Fake Out either coming out from that Rillaboom. A Sludge Bomb follow-up, but it's not enough to pick up the KO here. Landorus Sludge Bombs aplenty with the replying Sludge Bomb into the Fluttermane. Woodhammer taking down that Fluttermane as well on Boris's side. A knockout apiece.
Yeah, it takes double damage, though, to be able to remove Fluttermane from the field, and Rillaboom only just being able to hang on thanks to its Assault Vest item, making it, you know, bulkier against these special attacks, which Landorus is, of course, rolling with at the moment. Urshifu on Boris' side, which is the single strike, dark and fighting type variant, is now here to play.
I think really what we've got to break down here is how these two players are playing in this match. Francesco trying to make reads, trying to make optimizations in the turn, trying to get a little bit more out of the turn, but Boris playing very straight, very straightforwardly, and just making sure that every turn he's taking advantage of what Francesco could do in his favor. Just getting that Sludge Bomb onto the Rillaboom means that it's not going to be able to switch in on any attacks.
Does a little bit of damage, a little underwhelming, but critically quickly does break the focus sash onto that opposing Urshifu. So Rillaboom, knowing that it doesn't have the most defensive pressure thanks to the parting shot and its speed has been lowered by the Icy Wind, it had to go for that priority Grassy Glide. Urshifu doing what it does best and goes for the Wicked Blow, guaranteed critical hit to be able to get the second knockout in this turn for Boris. It's now going to be a very uphill struggle for the little Incineroar on Francesco's side. That
Incineroar is going to have so much work to do, and unfortunately it can only target one Pokemon at a time. Of course, its set is really towards being able to support its team rather than do all of the work itself, and Boris has played this so well and going to be able to take game one in really very few turns.
Exactly, and I think Boris played very well at the beginning of that game, you know, capitalizing on things like the parting shot and the Icy Wind to really lower the pressure that Francesco had on the field. As well on Francesco's side, going for that brave Water Terror very early on just didn't pay off for him, and then you didn't have that capability for Pokemon later in the match that I think would have benefited from it a bit more. Going into game two though, Ben, do you think we're going to see any adjustments on the teams?
I think we're going to see few adjustments on the teams. I think we're going to see the main adjustment in the way that they approach this. Boris, I think, really took advantage of Francesco turn one going for that Ghost Terror, said, hey, I'm going to read what you're going to be able to do and then take advantage of it. And that, I think, set the tone for the way that Francesco was playing the rest of the match, where they were trying to overextend a little bit, take a little bit more advantage out of a turn, go for a Wood Hammer rather than a fake out onto Landorus. Well, the Landorus just managed to get a Sludge Bomb into it instead, and so it ended up that Francesco was not really taking advantage of those turns. And I really like the way that Boris really switched up the way that he was playing just after turn one. You can see how effective that is. So I really do think it comes down to the decisions that the trainers make more than the matchup itself in this situation.
Well, it shows the flexibility of the Flutter Mane, like we were talking about earlier. You know, Moonblast, get the KO onto that Urshifu, and then let's switch to a more supportive role with that Icy Wind, which enabled the other Pokemon on Boris' side to come through and rise into the forefront. I think critically as well, you know, we've spoken a lot about this debate of Rapid Strike versus Single Strike Urshifu, and definitely the Single Strike came out on top here. Not only was it able to actually go for a move in this particular match, but the Wicked Blows are just so devastating and enough to be able to get knockouts, particularly if you can double up with a partner Pokemon just to guarantee that damage. Looks like there's no changes in the leads coming out, however, for Boris. Francesco taking a leaf out of that playbook, though, and it's a Flutter Mane Incineroar Mirror.
I like this a lot more from Francesco. This is going to stop Boris from being able to take quite as much advantage. It does telegraph where the fake outs are going in this turn, of course, but Francesco on his side of the field is going to be carrying the Choice Specs on the Flutter Mane. And when these supportive Flutter Manes come up against a Choice Specs Flutter Mane, it really does highlight the differences between that Pokemon, where Choice Specs is going to put a lot of damage on the board very quickly for Francesco and maybe pave the way for that Choice Scarf Urshifu later on, whereas Boris wants to, you know, kind of slow things down, slow his opponent's team down so that the rest of the team can function properly.
I'd also be very wary if I was the Landorus on the opposing side, if it is indeed in the back, about Icy Winds coming out from a Choice Specs Flutter Mane. We already saw how much it did previously when it wasn't wearing those fancy spectacles. Again, Sparkle's raining here. It's going to be the Ghost Terror on the Incineroar once again, just making sure that it cannot be hit by Fake Out and will be able to get some damage on the board. Flutter Mane wisely, I think, going for a Protect here, wants to maybe see what the Choice Specs Flutter Mane is going to lock itself into. Incineroar once again falling victim to the Ghost Incineroar on the opposing side of the field, as Shadow Ball is the choice. This will deal super effective damage to either target in the next turn.
What a great move to be able to lock into here, but Flare Blitz is the reply from Boris, getting 50% damage down on that Choice Specs Flutter Mane. It cannot protect itself, but nor can Incineroar in this spot, and now that the Flutter Mane has locked itself into the Shadow Ball, I really like that combination of play. If you get the Fake Out onto the Incineroar, great. If you get the KO onto the Flutter Mane, great. If the Incineroar goes for the Ghost Terror, now you've got a super effective Shadow Ball into that slot as well. So a really good way of covering all the bases from Francesco.
And a good example of not just playing for the turn in front of you, but the turns ahead as well, thinking about what the eventualities could be. Now, if you're Boris, yes, you're in a position where you can go for another Flare Blitz, and I think there is enough reasonable bulk behind an Incineroar to be able to take a Shadow Ball, but from a Choice Specs variant, that's what I'm not so confident on.
And certainly with the backup of the Incineroar, maybe going for a Flare Blitz as well, this could get a little dicey for the Incineroar. have to see as Urshifu joins the field with its dark typing, will resist the Shadow Ball, and the Shadow Ball does go into the Urshifu here.
Still does about a third of damage as Incineroar adds a little bit of insult to injury with that parting shot. Of course, Wicked Blow with the critical hit is going to be able to negate that, but if it was going for one of its other moves as well, that will come into effect.
And the Incineroar gets the opportunity now to reposition itself, bring in that Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is a really good Pokemon to be sitting in front of an Urshifu single strike. The Flare Blitz follow-up from Incineroar. The Flutter Mane has gone down. Boris is able to remove that powerful special attacking threat from the field, and Francesco again gets one Pokemon knocked out without actually managing to do much damage.
That's a really good point, actually. A Pokemon that did apply so much pressure on the field, and once again Boris is able to completely neutralize that threat, get it KO back into its Pokeball, and gain a Pokemon advantage. You do, of course, now have the Rillaboom. That is a Pokemon that can go for some decent damage with those Wood Hammers, also go for that priority Grassy Glide to chip away a little bit. But are we going to see something very interesting here, Ben, or were my eyes deceiving me?
Well, is the Ogerpon in the back is the question. We didn't see it in Game 1, but we could be seeing it here in Game 2. But it's not going to be switching in, at least this turn. Shifu going for that water terrestrialization. Certainly Boris really capitalizing on it. Now that the Flutter Mane has removed itself from the field, it's not going to get that booster energy speed boost, and so this Urshifu is in prime position to do lots of damage.
That's a very good point. It has got that choice scarf, very fashionable and very fast. Going into the Incineroar, of course, it's not a fire type anymore, and I don't think this is going to be enough.
It's not enough.
Incineroar able to hang on, but maybe Rillaboom is able to finish off the job.
And it looks like a Wicked Blow is going to be going first into the Rillaboom, doing above 50%. That's really, really good damage as a Wood Hammer. I don't think the Wood Hammer was necessary there, Lou, but it certainly did do the job and covered what Pokemon Boris had in the back.
I think you're right there. Yes, a Grassy Glide could have been good and then stopped, you know, just any potential thing coming out from the Incineroar there, but the Wood Hammer, like you say, covering a potential switch in from a Flutter Mane in the back, or even if it is something like that Ogerpon, you want to be able to hit it hard and get it away from your partner Urshifu, that wants to go for all of these water type attacks.
Well, Flutter Mane no longer having its booster energy. Flutter Mane the Grumpy, after its booster energy has been taken away coming in, but without that speed boost, the Urshifu is going to be threatening a clean one-hit knockout, and the Urshifu's taken enough damage here that maybe it's in range of a Surging Strikes too.
That's a very good point, actually. It's had its Focus Sash broken. It has taken a significant chunk of damage. The Incineroar is going to rejoin the fray, though, throw that Intimidate down. Of course, Wicked Blow, really not going to worry about that. Always something to consider, but you do at least have the Fake Out. Urshifu, fast and furious, able to go for one Surging Strikes, and Ben, I'm pretty sure the third one's going to clean this up.
2 Surging Strikes down. That's definitely in KO range of the third here. What a one-hit knockout there for Francesco, taking away that Flutter Mane that caused so many problems in Game 1. The dynamics of this game have been totally different, and even though Francesco didn't have the greatest start with Flutter Mane going down, he's managed to maneuver himself into such a great spot offensively.
I really like the redemption arc that Francesco's Urshifu is currently going on, you know, being able to get a KO, take the Wicked Blow, and it's not the Ogerpon Pokemon trainers, it is instead the Landorus, a prime target for another Surging Strikes.
And with the Fake Out pressure that's just come in from this Incineroar, the Urshifu has its choice of targets. Fake Out going to be going into that Urshifu single strikes, but Urshifu Rapid Strike reminding us why it's one of the strongest Pokemon in the video game right now. 2 hits, all it needs to knock out that Landorus in 1.
Doesn't need the third, it can rest a little bit, stretch those shoulders, and get ready for the next target in its sights. Landorus does indeed go down, and now it is just the Urshifu on Boris' side that is unable to go for any damage this turn thanks to the Incineroar. Now, of course, Incineroar not going to worry too much about Wicked Blows coming its way thanks to its Dark typing. Yes, it's going to have to worry about close combats, but that's where the Intimidates are going to pay off in the endgame.
And Surging Strikes now going to be going first, of course, with Urshifu carrying the Choice Scarf. Urshifu single strike on the other end with the Focus Sash, but that Focus Sash is broken already, also broken by those Rapid Strikes from Urshifu. Rapid Strike, and it is enough for the knockout. Francesco tying this setup 1-1.
I mean, hold the phone. Rapid Strike is on the line, and it would like an apology from all of its doubters. It has definitely been phenomenal in this game too. And Pokemon trainers, we've got a Game 3 straight out of the blocks here at this special event. Ben, going into this, I thought Francesco was in a little bit of a difficult situation, losing that Flutter Mane pretty early doors, but then was able to get the comeback. How was he able to get it in this game too?
No Ogerpon. I mean, really, that is the story of this matchup. Does the Ogerpon come? Clearly, Boris doesn't think that it's required in this matchup where it can be under threat from the Landorus, it can be under threat from U-turns and close combat from the Urshifu, makes Francesco kind of play a little bit differently around it until the end game. And of course, Rillaboom actually does put on a lot of pressure, able to go for Woodhammers. If the Ogerpon goes for a Terastallization, becomes a pure water type, then Grassy Glide is usually enough to either pick up a knockout or put it under pressure of a knockout as well. So maybe it's got a little bit of a difficult spot in this game, but after seeing game 2, that's what I'm looking at for Boris. Bring that Ogerpon. Just stop that Urshifu from doing exactly what it wants to be doing.
I mean, in game 1, Boris was able to shut the Urshifu down with the Flutter Mane without having to, rely on that Ogerpon at all. But I think in game 3, it's going to be a bit of a necessity. Even if it's not going to be able to face down against the Urshifu directly, it can still provide some excellent support. Something like the Follow Me, able to draw attacks away from a partner Pokemon, and we know how much damage Urshifu and Flutter Mane can do, for example, if they're able to gain that support. Additionally, an Ivy Cudgel into an Incineroar, that's something that Boris isn't going to mind doing at all.
Not at all, no. And even the Rillaboom there, if it maybe was forced to go for a Terastallization into its Terra Fire, it could be something that the Ogerpon would particularly like in that situation. And talking about Terastallization, Boris has in both games gone for the Terra Ghost on the Incineroar and used it as that ledge up, so to speak, at the start of the game. Let's get ourselves off to a good start. Let's put ourselves in a position to really play into the mid and end game. But I'm wondering if Boris is going to switch that up this game. Do you go for a fake out for the 3rd game into the row into an Incineroar that has 2 times in a row gone for a Terra Ghost?
That's the thing, and I think if I was Boris, I would want to conserve my Terastallization a little bit more as well, because although it does work at the beginning of the game, it doesn't necessarily have that longevity. But one Pokemon choice change that I do fully agree with is that Ogerpon on the field. Yeah, and not only that, it's already facing down against 2 Pokemon it could do significant damage to.
The Intimidate does kind of stop that in its tracks a little bit, but Ivy Cudgel has got an increased chance to get a critical hit.
That's
and so
true.
Sometimes in this situation, you just go for the Ivy Cudgel, and a little bit of a chunk of the time, you absolutely get the payoff from it. Of course, now there is the worry about the Rillaboom in the back as well for Boris. He's going to have to manage that going forward, and also manage his choice specs on the Flutter Mane on Francesco's side, because if Francesco really wants to go for it, he can go for the Terra Fairy, he can launch a Moonblast into the Ogerpon. If it doesn't go for the Terra in reply, that Ogerpon could be knocked out in 1.
That's a very good point, actually, and these teams are led to have good switchability, so knowing, as you can see, that the Rillaboom is indeed on the roster here for Francesco, as the Ogerpon player, you want to be able to keep it safe in the back and find a nice way to get it off the field. It's actually a double switch here straight away, Francesco, not enjoying the leads that have come out here, wanting to make some adjustments and say, hey, Rillaboom can KO your Ogerpon, Urshifu can KO your Flutter Mane, it's now up to you to make a move.
Icy Wind avoided by Rillaboom on the switch in, but that's only going to be a little bit of damage. More important that Urshifu takes a speed drop. It's effectively now not holding a choice scarf. The Ivy Cudgel comes into Rillaboom, no critical hit in sight here, and Rillaboom shrugs that off like a champ.
Rillaboom's very happy right now. It's able to kind of mock this opposing Ogerpon by taking negligible damage, and as well can apply so much more with something like the Woodhammer. It's also carrying that Assault Vest, so it doesn't have to worry too much about the opposing Flutter Mane. We already know from game 1 that it's able to take a Moonblast.
And in this particular situation, we've seen it just lock in there. The fake out stopping the Ogerpon going for the Follow Me. That gives the Urshifu the opportunity to go for its Terra Water Surging Strikes. And there's nothing that Boris really wants to be switching in that slot right now. If it's the Landorus in the back, that's going to get knocked out. The Flutter Mane's going to get knocked out as well. It's going to be able to do a little bit of damage, but a little bit of damage too late.
Yes, and once again, it's going to be the Water Terastallization on this Urshifu, adding a little bit more of a pack to its punch when it comes to those Surging Strikes. The fake out goes down into the Ogerpon. No spiky shield, so will be able to connect, as Flutter Mane, being a little bit faster, can go for that Moonblast. No fighting type, however, so will not be able to get the knockout, allowing this Urshifu to retaliate with what it does best and go for 1, 2, and inevitably 3 Surging Strikes to get the knockout.
And now that Urshifu is going to be able to switch itself out, get itself repositioned, use the Pokemon in the back, especially now that that Ogerpon has been intimidated as well, to come back later on, not pressured by the booster energy on the Flutter Mane there with the Icy Wind and the Moonblast that can knock it out. Instead, it's going to be at full speed, can launch U-turns into the Ogerpon, can launch close combats there as well. And it doesn't matter that it can't use its Water-type moves as freely anymore when it's still going to be doing lots of damage, but that Landorus is looking pretty threatening too.
Yeah, Landorus definitely can go for those Sludge Bombs into the Rillaboom, but we did see, thanks to the Assault Vest, that it is able to take one of those pretty reasonably well. Won't be able to take a second one, however, but that could be all that Rillaboom needs to be able to shut down this opposing Ogerpon. The critical thing for Boris here, though, is do you play defensively? Do you go for a Spiky Shield here and kind of burn through that turn that Rillaboom can go for that Wood Hammer, allowing Landorus to get the 2-hit KO in it later? With an Assault Vest, you know it can't go for any protecting moves, so it is going to be a little bit vulnerable. Francesco has the opportunity to go for a switch, but you can't bring in the Flutter Mane to take a Sludge Bomb. The only thing you can really bring in would be the Incineroar.
Could be the Incineroar. That's exactly what's coming in. Well called there, Lou. And bringing the Intimidate onto the field, further reducing the attack of that Ogerpon. One thing that Boris hasn't done yet is go for his Terastallization, though. It's going to be Terra Poison. We saw that Rillaboom could indeed take the Sludge Bomb, but boosted up by its Terra type now being Poison, I'm not sure it can take it.
That's a big brain play if I've ever seen one before. Being able to get the extra damage to deal with this Rillaboom. Ogerpon going to be able to take a Grassy Glide reasonably well, and here's the Sludge Bomb, gets the extra boost from the Terastallization. Is Rillaboom safe? It is not! It goes down! Wow!
What a KO there. Francesco definitely feeling the effects of that Sludge Bomb. Horn Leech into Incineroar. Is that the critical hit, Lou?
It definitely is. You know, we don't see a Horn Leech do that much damage every day. Of course, it's still minimal compared to what the Sludge Bomb was able to do, but this was exactly what Boris had to do coming through to the end game of this set. Not going for that Ghost Terastallization on the Incineroar, and instead conserving it for a more opportune moment to just get the knockout, get the momentum, and now put himself in such a good position to take the set.
The only Pokemon on Francesco's team that was able to launch super effective damage into that now Terra Poison Landorus was the Rillaboom with its high horsepower. Now that's been knocked out, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. You really, as the Urshifu, want to launch your Water-type attacks into that slot, but with Ogerpon next to it, it's really doing a good job at protecting Landorus. At some point, you've got to make a little bit of a call. Like previously, you've got the fake-out support there. You can actually go for the Surging Strikes this turn, but then maybe you get locked into a little bit more of a difficult end game.
Ogerpon's been the problem since the start of this game 3, actually. And yes, the fake out stops are going for the follow me here. Oh, is the third one going?
It can take it.
Oh, it doesn't. It actually goes down. Okay, that derails my train of thought.
Totally. Yeah. Normally, a Landorus Eye goes for a Terra Poison and it's able to just hang on from a Surging Strikes, but the training of Francesco's Urshifu, as well as that Terra Water that he's so valiantly committed to here in all 3 games, really does change the momentum here, stopping that Landorus just sweeping through the rest of the team. Now it's Incineroar and Ogerpon for Boris. I'm questioning whether or not he can find a way here.
I mean, when it comes down to Ogerpon versus the Urshifu, for example, Ogerpon is going to be victorious here. Ogerpon versus Incineroar, Ogerpon's also going to be victorious. Incineroar has a little bit of a difficult time against the Urshifu, of course, with those Surging Strikes, and Incineroar versus Incineroar is pretty neutral. So really, everything goes onto the shoulders of that Ogerpon, and I think it's quite a difficult situation to maneuver for Boris, particularly considering there's a Flutter Mane in the back.
And naturally, the Urshifu has to switch out, stop using those Surging Strikes that could instead heal the Ogerpon here. Horn Leech coming out into the Flutter Mane there. I'm really impressed at how much damage that's doing. I mean, it's boosted by the grassy terrain, but wow, nearly 50% to a Flutter Mane. That's impressive. And it does look like it's putting that Flutter Mane in range of an Ivy Cudgel.
Particularly considering it's taken that Intimidate as well from the Incineroar, that the Horn Leeches are still dealing good damage. Grassy terrain does leave the field though, so they will not be able to get the KO onto the Flutter Mane into this next turn. The issue with Ogerpon, though, when Urshifu's on the field, is it must be tempting to go for the follow me, but you actually need to go for damage. There's not a lot the Incineroar can do. Flutter Mane going for the Moonblast, identifying the threat, but a very wide Spiky Shield on Boris' side, enabling the Incineroar to maybe go for something like the Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane and try and remove it from the field, which is why I also like this play by Francesco going, hey, You kind of need to go for Flare Blitz. I'm going to make that a little bit less helpful for you and going to lower its attack with that parting shot, as well as enabling Urshifu to come back on the field.
The speed interaction between those two Incineroar has been really critical in this entirety of the match. The Flare Blitz follow-up, is it enough? But it's not enough to pick up the KO there on the Flutter Mane. It's hanging on with just 23 hit points. Gets another opportunity to go for a Moonblast. Unlikely that it's going to be able to Spiky Shield a second time in a row. But even if it does, Urshifu's got the opportunity to go for close combat and then close combat into that slot. Doesn't matter how many Horn Leeches you get off, it's still going to be picking up the knockout unless the Ogerpon's able to take this close combat Moonblast and then be able to get the Horn Leech into the Urshifu.
I think taking the Moonblast on the follow-up, though, is a bit of a tall order.
A little bit of a tall order.
Yeah, there we go. With a cheeky critical hit for style points, able to get the knockout, and now it is just that Incineroar versus Francesco's team. I mean, the knockoff, yeah, nice, you get the KO, but I think critically, if you hadn't have taken that parting shot, the Flare Blitz would have knocked out the Flutter Mane, and it would have been a much more advantageous endgame for Boris coming in. But just being able to have that sheer power, particularly losing your Landorus, now losing your Ogerpon, there really isn't too much that can be done. And Francesco has come back in this set from losing game 1.
2 games in a row where Rapid Strike Urshifu was the key piece of the puzzle there for Francesco. He's taking the win, will be going 3-0 in the Utrecht special event, and what a way to do it.